Land doesn't forget who worked it. People forget. Land just waits. This was in the red dirt hill country of eastern Oklahoma, in the last week of March, when the mornings still carried frost but the afternoons smelled like thawed earth and diesel. Somewhere a mile off, a dog barked at nothing. The wind moved through dead broomsage grass with a sound like paper tearing, slow and steady, over and over. Walter Grimes was 61 years old, with a left hand missing half its ring finger, lost to a hay baler in 1987, and he stood at the edge of a pasture nobody wanted, holding a folded auction slip that said he now owned 11 acres of weeds. Forced out by his family, he bought a weed-choked pasture for $35. 9 months later it stunned them. Land doesn't forget who worked it. People forget. Land just waits. This was in the red dirt hill country of eastern Oklahoma, in the last week of March, when the mornings still carried frost but the afternoons smelled like thawed earth and diesel. Somewhere a mile off, a dog barked at nothing. The wind moved through dead broomsage grass with a sound like paper tearing, slow and steady, over and over. Walter Grimes was 61 years old, with a left hand missing half its ring finger, lost to a hay baler in 1987, and he stood at the edge of a pasture nobody wanted, holding a folded auction slip that said he now owned 11 acres of weeds. The land had a name once. Locals called it the Coley Place, after the family that farmed it for 3 generations before the youngest son sold off pieces to pay medical debt. By the time Walter found it, the 11 acres had gone unworked for 6 years. Johnson grass stood chest high. A collapsed hog shed leaned into a fence line strangled by honeysuckle vine. The soil test, when Walter finally ran one, came back at a pH of 5.2 sour ground, the kind most men wouldn't touch. Walter knew dirt. His father had taught him on 240 acres 40 miles south, land that had been in the family since 1946. Walter worked that ground for 38 years, right alongside his younger brother Dale and, later, Dale's 2 sons. Then their father died without a proper will, and what followed wasn't a fight exactly. It was quieter than that. A slow redrawing of who belonged where. Walter's nephews took the operation digital, brought in a farm management consultant, started talking about legacy assets and underperforming labor. 6 months later, at 61, Walter was drawing an $1,100 monthly settlement and a handshake that felt more like a door closing than a goodbye. He didn't argue. He packed a truck, a 1998 Ford F-250 with 214,000 miles on it, and left. The 11 acres sold at a county tax auction for $35. Nobody bid against him. If you've ever been told politely that what you built or worked for doesn't count anymore, stay with me. This is one of those stories. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. Somebody underestimated a man with a notebook and a piece of ground nobody else wanted. And 9 months later, that mistake had a number attached to it. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching this from tonight. Walter didn't argue with Rick Paget. He went back to work. Every morning before 7, he walked the fence line with a green Write in the Rain notebook in his back pocket, the kind surveyors use, waterproof pages, and he wrote down what he saw. Not opinions. Observations. Soil moisture at 6 inches, measured with a $19 hand probe from Tractor Supply. Grass regrowth in inches, measured against a wooden stake he drove into the ground near the creek. Dung beetle activity, something almost nobody checks, because Walter's father had taught him that healthy dung beetle populations meant the soil biology underneath was still alive, no matter how sour the pH reading came back. The first clue came in April. Under 3 feet of dead Johnson grass thatch, Walter found the soil dark and crumbly, not the pale, dead gray Paget's report implied. He wrote it down. Dark topsoil, 4 to 6 inches, good tilth, April 14th. The second clue came in May, after Walter limed the acreage using 2 tons of AG lime per acre, applied with a borrowed spreader off the back of his Kubota B2601, a compact tractor he'd bought used for $9,400. Within 3 weeks, the little blue stem near the creek had spread nearly 18 inches into ground that had been bare. He photographed it. He wrote the date. The third clue was the water. Walter noticed the creek bottom stayed moist even in a dry stretch in June. when the county was under a burn ban and neighboring pastures had cracked like old paint. He dug a test hole 22 inches down and found a clay lens holding moisture like a shallow reservoir, something the original soil survey, done in 1978, hadn't accounted for. Nobody watched him do any of this. There was no audience. Just a man, a notebook, a $9,400 tractor, and 11 acres that were quietly proving something. By August, Walter had rotational grazed 6 head of cattle on paddocks he'd sectioned off with portable electric fence, moving them every 3 days. The grass came back faster than it left. He kept records of gain per head, forage height before and after grazing, and rainfall totals from a $22 rain gauge nailed to a fence post. He never told anyone what he was finding. He didn't need to yet. In December, the county held a small agricultural roundtable, extension staff, a few local ranchers, a representative from a regional lender, Continental Trust, that was fielding loan applications for land improvement projects. Walter came because a neighbor asked him to, not because he wanted to. Rick Paget was there too, presenting updated land use recommendations for the district. When he pulled up the 11 acres on his slide, still logged in the county system as low productivity, acidic soil, recommend non-agricultural use, a woman from Continental Trust, reviewing loan files, asked a simple question. Has this parcel been reassessed since 2019? Nobody answered right away. Then Walter opened his notebook. He didn't give a speech. He just read the numbers. Soil pH corrected from 5.2 to 6.4 in 8 months. Forage yield up an estimated 40% over baseline. 6 head of cattle grazed and gained a combined 380 pounds over the season, verified by his vet's records, the same vet, incidentally, who charged him $340 for a single herd health visit back in July. Water retention in the creek bottom holding through a declared drought period. The room went quiet in a specific way, not embarrassed exactly, just recalibrating. Paget's original assessment had priced the land's rehabilitation at an estimated $14,000 in lime, reseeding, and drainage work, a cost that made the solar lease recommendation look reasonable. Walter's actual cost, documented in the same notebook, came to $2,180. Word moved the way it does in small towns, not fast but thorough. By spring, 3 neighboring landowners had asked Walter to walk their ground and tell them what he saw. He didn't charge much, $20 an hour and gas money. Continental Trust approved land improvement loans for 2 of those neighbors using Walter's grazing and soil data as a reference case, something the loan officer said she'd never done with a landowner's personal notebook before.